Welcome into the NFL podcast on this Sunday, December 29th. We usually record with A_Schnicker on Tuesday nights and try to get you ready for the movement of potential lines and the betting market. But A_Schnicker was too busy, I think, with family commitments this week. We were not able to schedule a time. But on the Betting the Pitch Podcast Network, we will not leave you hanging. Today, we are doing an NFL as we get to it, with games starting in just a couple hours. I have a NFL insider Tony coming into us. We're still figuring out his Twitter account handle at the moment. Tony, how are you doing on this beautiful Sunday morning in the deluge of South Carolina?
Oh, just keeping dry and getting ready for the games to start.
So Tony is unfortunately out of his fantasy football championship run, first time in years, but he is very into this, actually a little bit deeper in the rookie game than I am. As his league is very, very dynasty heavy. But we're going to go through each game on this NFL card. We have six in the 1 o'clock Eastern time window, two in the 4 o'clock, one Sunday night football, of course, and then a Monday nighter. So trying to get through as many games as possible in the next few minutes. And we will have best bets end of show. If you're not a member of my Patreon, check it out, patreon.com/thereal_G Warner. The best spot for all plays, leans, write-ups across all sports, including a big soccer card today, plus the NFL coming out. College basketball still with us until April as well. So, Tony, we'll start in this first matchup with your New York Giants, 7.5 point underdogs to the Indianapolis Colts. Total is 40 on this matchup. You don't have to have a pick for every game, but what are your insights for the Giants who are trying not to win to hold on to that top pick in the NFL draft?
This game is a quarterback mess with injuries on both teams. It looks like Richardson's out for the Colts. Uh, the Giants'
Richardson is out
defense
for the
is
Colts.
okay.
What? Richardson is out for the Colts?
Richardson, yeah, it looks like Flacco's starting.
Oh my gosh, what a that is newsworthy. And that's why we come to you on Sunday this week instead of the Tuesday night. I feel like there's so many late breaking, like huge injuries. I honestly feel like I need to recheck this number to make sure I even have the right one. So Richardson out, that's a pretty big deal. And
Yeah,
so that probably means a lot of Jonathan Taylor, you think?
there is, a 40 over under is not that high in an NFL game. I mean, 21-20 gets you there, but I got to tell you something. I don't see the Giants sniffing 20 points today. And the reality is Flacco makes going the under tricky because there are some weeks where he chucks it for 350, 370 and a few touchdowns, and others where he's a pick machine. So I'm staying away from the over under. And if I had to make a pick on this game, I would take Flacco and the Colts over the Giants. 7.5 is a little rich, which is probably why I'll keep my money in my pocket in that game. But gun against the head, I'd take the Colts and lay the points.
Yeah, it looks like Richardson didn't practice all week. Shame on me for not looking a little bit closer at this matchup. But as a very, very desperate fantasy owner of Jonathan Taylor, I'm going to need another 40 or so points from him this week. If I had to make a pick, I'm very curious. I mean, it just feels like so Giants like to win this game and lose the draft position. Colts have everything to play for, though. They are still in the playoff race. Had that huge comeback victory for the Bengals yesterday, which keeps Indianapolis alive, though barely breathing. Feels like a pretty big price for Joe Flacco, as you said. He is turnover prone to say the least. But I feel like the Giants quarterback situation might be worse. We'll move next to the Las Vegas Raiders visiting the New Orleans Saints. Currently, the Raiders a 1.5 point favorite. Total is 37.5 on this one. If you thought 40 was a decent NFL total, welcome to 37.5 land. The Raiders coming off a dominant victory, if you could call it that, against the Jaguars last week in Vegas. Now they head east or south and east to New Orleans for a pretty early start for them. Raiders basically took themselves out of first place or last place for the first NFL draft pick this year, but are 1.5 point favorites, I think, based on the Saints looking horrible on a road trip to Green Bay. Are you buying into the Raiders win streak all of a sudden after having lost every game since it felt like 2022? Or do you think the Saints are maybe a little bit just snake bitten with so many injuries?
Well, this is another quarterback mess.
There are going to
I'm
be a
not
lot
even
of them.
sure. Yeah, I'm not even sure. Are the Saints starting? Uh, what's his
I
name?
would expect Rattler, especially after
Yeah,
a beautiful display on Monday Night Football. I mean, There's a lot of problems in the Saints quarterback room, that's for sure.
Yeah. And,
Derek
you
Carr
know,
ruled out.
Desmond Ritter or O'Connell would be going for the Raiders. So I don't expect a lot of points here. Uh, I'm buying in that the Raiders play hard for Antonio Pierce. I do think they respect their coach. That's part of the reason he got the full-time job after the interim job last year. Uh, they're just not a very good team. But I, other than being on the road, I would lean towards the Raiders because late in the year, teams that play hard seem to have an edge, and the Saints are a mess, a team with an interim coach that is not going to be kept with the quarterback problem. Who knew you could miss Derek Carr this much? But they miss him. So again, not a game I'm taking my wallet out for because of the mediocrity in the key position. But my personal vantage point is to lean towards the Raiders.
Yeah, I think it's Aiden O'Connell starting for the Raiders, at least after his decent performance against the
Yeah.
Jaguars last weekend. We'll see really what this game looks like. I think we'll know pretty early how this game will go. I do think there's value in the Saints at home. I also think that there's value in the early body clock start time for the Raiders heading east, even if it is a Central Time starting game at noon local. I do think the Saints are a little bit undervalued here after getting demolished by what to me is a good Green Bay Packers team, maybe one of the best. Maybe you could even call them elite. So I'll take the Saints plus 1.5 in that matchup. We'll go next to the Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Currently a pick 'em in Jacksonville and Duval, not too far from here. Total is 38 on this one. Do you think the quarterback situation is the best of any of the three games we talked about in this one?
I'm rarely speechless, but
We
Pick'em is the appropriate line for this game. And it's a pretty sad commentary on a Jaguar team that entered the year with some optimism and that they've gone off the rails. And this is far beyond Trevor Lawrence not playing. Their defense has not showed up at certain times. They've made dumb plays. The coach seems to have lost the team. Uh, the Titans are an interesting team. I think they're a much better squad than the Jaguars. When Levis was playing, they were having some serious problems on the offense. Their defense, not great, solid. And I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with the Titans, even though they're on the road. Uh, I think their defense can get them the victory. And Mason Rudolph, mediocre as he is, I think he's more offensive skilled than Will Levis. So I would go with the Titans on that.
Yeah, I think I'd go for more talent with Will Levis, but I don't think he's a trustworthy NFL quarterback. He throws too many pick sixes to really be trusted. The thing is I think the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, seeing the number at Pick'em at home, that essentially is saying that the Titans are a better team on a neutral field. Defense might be. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars have more talented skill position players, but you got to get them the ball, and that's the biggest question. Mac Jones, we've seen his career start really well and then flame out as the New England Patriots organization has seemed to as well. I think my biggest interest in this matchup is under 38 points. Just hoping to avoid some turnovers and defensive touchdowns because to me, two quarterbacks that should take care of the ball pretty well. And then really just we'll see how quickly they can move the ball up and down the field or how many punts will be out there. Moving next to New York Jets, a 10-point underdog at the Buffalo Bills. Total is 45 in this matchup. Jets probably the biggest underperformers of the year, at least in retrospect to a 9.5 season win total. Nowhere near that number. I think it went under months ago, even around Thanksgiving time when I was last here in South Carolina. The Bills, I guess, have a little bit to play for, outside chance at a one seed, but that went all by the wayside with the Chiefs win this week. So you could argue that the Bills don't have much to play for, maybe besides coming off a really disappointing outing against the New England Patriots at home last week.
Yeah, the Bills just need to watch their backside because remember, if they get tied by the Ravens in the standings, they lose the tiebreaker with the head-to-head loss. So they could conceivably fall to a number three by losing this, since, like you said, the Chiefs locked up the number one and the only bye. I think the Bills, they're at home. 10 points is a lot, but this is not the Jet defense that everyone, Jet fan or otherwise, thought we were going to have coming into this season. And so I easily see the Bills putting up 27 points. And the Jet problem, there's so much commentary, and he takes all the oxygen out of the room about Aaron Rodgers. But the reality is, it's well beyond Rodgers. The offensive line is a mess. The defense is underperformed. So I see the Bills putting up 27. And guess what? The Jets often seem to get stuck around 17. Even on weeks Rodgers gets some okay stats. The only thing the Jets really got going for them is Roger throws a touchdown pass. It's the 500th in his career. Jet fans don't care. I I I think the Bills are going to put the hammer on them. I know 10 points is a lot, but I think the Bills are going to hit them hard and then take week 18 off.
It does seem like the Bills, as you mentioned, I mean, they need to keep that two seed because that is important, especially if they set for the second round of the playoffs. After I guess the wild card, then we get the winners of the divisional round. I think the Jets. I mean, to me, there's a little bit of a radar screen right now, just with the Bills kind of struggling at home with the Patriots. The Jets clearly have a lot bigger names in their roster. Defense is problematic, of course. And the real question is how many targets will Garrett Wilson get in this matchup, or is he potentially going to leave town so they can dive deeper or get further in bed with Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams? I don't really know where to go with this one. I feel like we see some points in this matchup, so I'll go over 45, which I think is a little bit of a I guess a way to diversify from a Jets plus 10 exposure. But I think it's a derivative that the Jets play this game and or at least are in it for a while, score some points. So over 45 points in Orchard Park, New York. Move next to the Carolina Panthers, a 10-point underdog at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Total is 48 in this one. Injury news, Chuba Hubbard out, so take him out of your lineups. He's on IR, which leaves a pretty big hole in the Carolina Panthers backfield, but they nearly beat the Buccaneers. You could argue they should have a couple weekends ago when Hubbard fumbled late in overtime as the Panthers were driving for the game-winning score. The Bucs coming off a disappointing, to say the least, loss on Sunday Night Football at Dallas last week, which cost them the front-running spot in the NFC South. Now they are really, after losing both games, the Atlanta Falcons this year, they need Atlanta to finish behind them in the standings as all tiebreakers go the Dirty Birds' way. How do you think Tampa Bay responds as 10-point favorites? It's a gigantic number, but just first, how do you think they respond to that Dallas loss on Sunday night?
It's Tampa confuses me because they have had so many good, solid games the last 2 years under Baker Mayfield. But even when they win, they struggle with a bad Panther team almost every time they play. And I think this Buck team, they respect the coach, they play hard, their defense is underperformed. And yes, the Panthers are playing better. Bryce Young is looking competent at least. However, I think they're going to rise up. I think they need this game. I think they're embarrassed how they fell behind so much, the Cowboys. And I think they've got some good senior leadership on that team with people like Mike Evans. And say what you will about Baker Mayfield. He's a pit bull, and that guy will come to play. I don't like laying 10 points. That's too much for me. And the over under, I don't think the Panthers score enough to go with the over. So I think the Bucks are going to win the game, but probably by less than 10.
I'll take the Bucks. Excuse me. I'll take the Panthers plus 10 in this matchup as well. I think we see Panthers. This is the perfect situation for them. They're not great at winning games. We saw that even as a weird home favorite to the Dallas Cowboys just a few weekends ago. But Bryce Young's been really good in this role. The Bucks, I feel like, are a great underdog, but really struggled to kind of carry the water as favorite. I don't know necessarily how Carolina does in the backfield without Chuba Hubbard. That's certainly a loss, but running back, the most replaceable position on the field. I think we see the Bucks really nervous here, and I don't really like what I saw from them against Dallas. Certainly a different defense with Carolina here, but I do like the Panthers plus 10. Move next to those Dallas Cowboys, 7.5-point underdogs to the Philadelphia Eagles. Totals 37.5 in this one. Cowboys seem like they're still fighting for their coach, but who knows how long that'll last and if Mike McCarthy will return this offseason. Jalen Hurts didn't practice all week. I think he is out for this matchup. So what are you thinking about the Kenny Pickett-led Philadelphia Eagles in this matchup?
Kenny Pickett hasn't really done enough to give me any confidence confidence that the Eagles' passing game will be strong. However, one of the problems the Cowboys defense has had, although sporadic good games in stopping the rush, I don't think they can handle the Eagle offensive line and Saquon Barkley. And so I expect the Eagles to put up not the same number of points they would if Hurts was playing, but a reasonable number of points. You go to the other side of the ledger. Cooper Rush has improved. He's been quite competent for a backup, but by no means is he Dak Prescott or a great quarterback. And the Eagle defense is legit. I still expect the Eagles to cover, even with Kenny Pickett going against Cooper Rush,
I like the
based on their defense.
I like the Cowboys here because they're getting more than a touchdown. I think you're totally right. The Eagles defense might be the best in the league, and it might be the reason they win the Super Bowl. I do feel like the step back to Pickett, even if after scoring a bunch of points against the Washington Commanders last week, I just don't really trust it. I need to see it, and I feel like this is too big of a point spread for an in-division matchup. Move next to the Miami Dolphins. They are visiting the Cleveland Browns. Tua Tagovailoa downgraded to doubtful, and we saw the line move 3.5 points on the side and 4 points on the total. We have Dolphins -3 now, total at 33. Not a lot of great quarterbacks in this matchup either.
The Dolphins given three without their only quarterback who can get them to 20 points. I don't like that. I don't like that. Now taking the Browns, listen, as awful as Jameis Winston is, and he's not the one playing, it looks like it's GTR. But if they were playing Winston, sure, he'd throw a couple picks, but I think he'd get them to 24, 28 points and they'd win the game. DTR is probably not going to get him to that many points, but I I would take the Browns +3 and 17-13 to kind of win. And
Yeah,
you're getting three.
I'm with you on the Browns. I think there's a good chance the Dolphins win this game as they need it for the playoff picture, the dim hopes that they have. Late field goal to win this game. You walk out of there with like a free movie. You get in for free and get your money back, get your 3 hours, 3.5 hours of entertainment, and you get to potentially walk out of there with a nice little push on a Dorian Thompson-Robinson play. Move to the probably biggest game on the slate in terms of determining who's going to win this whole thing, maybe the Super Bowl and such. The Green Bay Packers are 1 point underdog at Minnesota. Total is 49.
Game of the week for sure. Two good teams. I grass a little pet peeve of mine. Packers are an excellent football team. Yes, they've been swept by Detroit, close games, and they lost their first match to the Vikings, and they're getting a lot of grief for that. Okay. They lost to the Eagles. So people are saying, yeah, they're a good team, but they've lost to these good teams. Yet everyone is jumping on the Packer bandwagon. And I know if the Packers win this game outright, all the Minnesota Viking doubters, and there's a ton of them, say, see, they're not good. They're not that good. They lose a tight game and it's their third loss of the year. They're still having a hell of a season. Pet peeve of mine got nothing to do with the prediction, but they're a good ball club. Their defense is solid. Darnold has played great. I love O'Connell as a coach. They got a good rush, passing game balance. I think this is going to be a great game. I think there's going to be some points scored. A 1 point spread is accurate. I'm going to lean towards the Packers winning on the road, just sort of a statistical reversion to the mean. All these tight losses to top teams, I think they're going to get one. But by no means does that mean I'm going to fall into the Monday morning quarterback narrative that the Vikings are frauds.
I think the Vikings are just too cheap here. 1 point favorites in one of the few decent home field environments in the NFL you'll find in the year of our Lord 2024, soon to be 2025. You're right. Should see points in this matchup. At least that's the game the Packers want to play, except they also try to run the ball and really waste clock as much as possible, too. I think the big question here is Brian Flores' defense, how that is handled by Jordan Love. I'll lean to Vikings -1. And honestly, I'm not sure I have much of a feel for the total. There's clearly some offense in this matchup, but we'll see. Big matchup, and everyone knows each other because they play each other twice a year. Moving to Sunday Night Football, we have Atlanta Falcons and the Washington Commanders. Big matchup for the Falcons to hang on to their NFC South lead and the Washington Commanders to clinch a playoff spot. Commanders 3.5 point favorites at home, totals 46.5 as Michael Penix makes his second start.
Interesting game. Really like what the Commanders have done. I really don't like with the expectations we had, Kirk Cousins or otherwise, for the Falcons going into the year, how they've played. Uh, we don't know. Penix got a lot of love for his game against the Giants last week. He didn't really do anything wrong, but for a first start, it was fine. But we still don't know what he's got. And this is a much better football team than the Giants, and certainly a much better offense for the Falcons to deal with. The odds makers get us every time. If this was three, I that extra hook, I think it'll be a tight ball game. The 3.5 is tricky, but I'm going to lean towards the Commanders. I
Yes.
think the offense is strong enough against a mediocre Falcon defense that I think between Robinson on the ground and Jaden Daniels, along with McLaurin and the other receivers, he spreads the ball around. He doesn't just send it to Scary Terry. He uses old man Zach Ertz at tight end. He uses the back. And of course, he's feeling better from that rib injury early in the year. And notice last week he started to run again. And that's a big time problem for any defense.
Yeah, so the Falcons have moved down from 4.5 point underdogs all the way down to this 3.5 number with a little bit more juice at Bet Online. If you're not a member at Bet Online or SportsBetting.ag, please follow the links in the podcast descriptions on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Go get some free money for a first-time deposit at either of those casinos, sister casinos. They use the same lines. So we've seen the Commanders. I mean, this one looks like it's heading back towards 3. I think that's a buy price for me on the Washington Commanders. The Falcons are still, to me, really unknown with Michael Penix. I don't trust him. I thought he looked very sluggish, very slow to make reads, and didn't really look very polished. Of course, hadn't played for a while, but the Giants defense is a little bit different than a Commanders team that look like they're heading to the playoffs. I think it's going to be hard for the Falcons to keep up on the scoreboard, and I don't think they're getting 2 defensive touchdowns handed to them from Drew Lock. So we'll move to Monday Night Football, then we'll get a best bet and get out of here on this Sunday, December 29th. The Detroit Lions, 3.5 point favorites on the road at San Francisco. Total is 50.5 points in this matchup. And maybe we see some concerns after watching what the Bears were unable to do against the Seahawks on Friday Night Football or Thursday Night Football this week, excuse me. Especially considering how many points the Bears were able to put up on the Lions last week. Do you think the 49ers, this is their last stand after closing a favorite to Miami last weekend and losing on the road?
Well, the 49ers are, you, listen, 49ers at home field, they sporadically at home, on the road. And so I think the 49ers are going to put up some points, but their defense is not what we have in our brains from last year. It's just been very mediocre. There's a few injuries on it. Yeah, we know about the 49er offense. The Lion defense with the double digit men on IR is not going to keep the 49ers low on the scoreboard. 49ers are going to put up points, but so are the Lions. I think 3.5 is a lot to give when you're on the road, but I'm on the Lions on this one. They're still fighting to get that top seed. They don't know what the Vikings are going to do and the Eagles are going to do. So they're motivated this week. I think and by the way, they lost to the Niners in the NFC Championship game, and their coach brought it up this week. So I think they're going to come out focused, and I think they'll put the Niners to bed.
I think the Niners are in bed, already tucked away. But, I guess there's a lot of personal pride on the line, though it certainly would benefit the 49ers for the draft position to lose this matchup as they've got no chance to make the playoffs. I think the Lions defense is really going to have to show out at some point before anyone can trust them. 3.5 point favorites on the road at San Francisco. I'm sure this number was probably flipped the other direction heading into this season. And I remember San Francisco, I think, was a 7 point favorite in the playoffs last season at home. How things change, but of course, no Christian McCaffrey is a big deal. I think my biggest interest in this matchup is over 50.5 points. Just it's hard to see that. It's a high total, but I think the Lions defense is in shambles, and the 49ers, as long as you're playing and you're active, you're out there trying to improve your stats and get a bigger contract. So I think we see the 49ers still giving it their all on this Monday, December 30th. So that does it for this episode. But before we get out of here, it's time for our best bets portion of the show. If you're not following the podcast on Betting the Pitch, you can find us Betting the Pitch on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you are looking for a YouTube subscription, go to @the_real_G Warner. And of course, we'll be putting this 1 minute video out on Instagram @the_real_G Warner as well. So Tony, thank you for joining us on a kind of a late call in. A_Snicker, I'm sure, is very thankful for you to come in and give a winner in his stead. Where are you going for your best bet on this episode?
It's interesting after what you just said. My best bet is going to be something that is not your best bet.
Oh, okay.
I think the Lion defense, I think the 49ers, I always look with over-unders. Which team do I think is going to lose outright and how many points can they get? And I think the 49ers are 23 to 25 points. And that means they're going over. All right. I don't think the 49er defense can keep the Lions below 28 to 32. And I think the 49ers, Brock Purdy's playing for a contract and he's going to throw some touchdowns on that injured defense.
Hey, this is real_G Warner on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and on YouTube. This is the best bet portion of the NFL podcast, recording live on Sunday, December 29th, instead of our usual Tuesday night slot with the holidays. You just heard our guest host, Tony, came in and he gave you out the Detroit Lions, San Francisco 49ers over 50.5 points on Monday Night Football. For my best bet, the real_G Warner, as you can find me on all social media platforms, I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers 10-point underdogs on the road at Tampa. Big price for an in-division matchup. Yes, there's no Chuba Hubbard in this matchup as he's on IR. Unfortunately, that's going to be a big hole to fill, but I feel like we've got a little bit more in terms of points for his absence. Plus 10 points is going to be a lot for a very pressured Tampa Bay Buccaneers team who have just suddenly slipped out of the NFC South lead and are unfortunately trying to hold on to that playoff spot. So grab the Lions 49ers over 50.5 points and grab the Panthers plus 10 on this episode of Betting the Pitch NFL edition. That'll do it for this episode. Thank you again for Tony for filling in. We'll get this posted and up on the socials as quickly as possible. We'll see you all next week for what should be a very riveting week 18 full of opt-outs, opt-ins, and all those sort of things as we finish up this NFL season on the Betting the Pitch Podcast Network.